say hi. Please, if you take videos or pictures, think about taking Soho friends as well as our lovely speakers today. Just to ask them after the talk for their Instagram. So yeah, that's it from my side. Now I'm gonna pass the word to Yuri. Have fun!
Thank you so much, Samna, for the great introduction. And yes, as she mentioned, if you have any, if you're interested in joining the Soul Friends or Soul House member, you can reach out to Anna, then she will be happily give you all the information that you will need. So I'd like to start with a very warm welcome to everyone who joined us here. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And some of you also I personally invited, and then thank you for having, making this time to your way to here. And then also some of our attendees today, actually you usually see them on the stage because they go to the event usually for speaking. But they also decided to come to join us, so I really appreciate for your attendance. And also we have a few guests also came from another city all the way to Berlin, so I really appreciate who came and then made this place, filled in this place together. So before I start, I always like to know a little bit about everyone. So can you raise hands if any of you are already actively working in the Web3 space? About 50%. That's awesome. Yeah. And also, can you also raise your hands if you are currently you get involved or wanted to do some activities around the gender diversity topic? Yeah, almost everyone, of course. So I'd like to start with a little bit of story from how I started my journey in the blockchain and the Web3 and a bit of gender diversity stuff. So I joined the blockchain space in 2017. At that time, I was based out of Singapore, and then sorry. Joining a lot of events to really I was able to learn. And then I studied gender imbalance, and then I started a little community there, and then it grew up to about 2,000 people, mainly based out of Asia, but also including some people from all around the world. And from there, I also learned a lot on how people perceive about the inclusion and the diversity topic. And in 2020, I decided to move to Berlin. And then since I'm moving around, I was thinking about how I can continue working on my Women in Blockchain initiative. So, so I decided to launch this platform named shechain.co. If you want to look it up, some women-founded Web3 startups, you can just open my website. It's ending with co.com. So you can open a website and you can simply look up some companies based on the keywords like industry or some technology wise. And so mainly I wanted to have this platform to mainly showcase and then to raise more visibilities on women-founded Web3 startups. And through that journey, I learned a lot about Web3 women, the movement, and then there was actually a lot of communities are working on this topic. Also in Berlin, we also have this Crypto Girls Club, and then there's also some organizations trying to bring more women to the conferences to speak. So I'm really happy that we are seeing that it's not only some of people working on it, but actually a lot of people are actually interested in and was passionate about the working on it together. So because it's not something that one person can actually do it. It's more the matter of inspiring and then also let people to spread out and to do the job. So and I'm really happy to have all of you in this room today. So today's title is the inclusive culture of Web3 from an investor and entrepreneur's perspective. And I wanted to give a little intro now with our three lovely panelists here. So we have Anna, who's working to revolutionize the fashion industry with AI and Metaverse, really cool keywords that you're working on now. And she's a founder of Yuna AI, and she's also one of the top female business influencers in technology by Strive magazine. And she's also awarded with the Digital Female Leader Award in the innovation category. So she's actually, very interesting fact is, she studied as a fashion designer, and then she learned to code, and then she found an opportunity in applying the neural networks technology into the design field. So it was really inspiring what she was doing. And the second panelist is Rebecca. She's an expert in how the culture, art, and people's perception has evolved in the human history. Really huge topic, right? She's a co-founder of NFT Club Berlin, and she's an expert on art and cultural history, and also sustainability and beliefs in a contemporary Buddhist context. And she's working with organizations to develop the innovative communities in the tech and creative fields. So I think by now, if any of you don't know about NFT Club Berlin, I think I would actually eager for you to know, like NFT Club Berlin, they're doing a lot of great works, Yeah. And now next to me, we have Ben, a super data-driven investor. He is also applying the psychology-based analysis methods to the startup evaluation, so you really need to be careful with him. And she's the managing director of Blog Rocket, one of the leading VC funds for early-stage Web3 startups in Europe. And she's also not only an investor, but also like a self-taught coder, very smart, he, I got used to it, sorry. Ben is he. He strongly believes in meritocratic systems, blockchain, and psychometrics, which you will tell me a little bit after me. And she's also the reason is usually my previous events in Singapore, I had a woman speaker, so I got used to say this. I really apologize. Yeah, he's cool. So he works in Europe and Asia also, and he's a strong advocate of the gender diversity. Yeah, when he talks about the gender diversity, it's really, really great. So now let me ask the first question. Let me just jump straight into the first question. And when you answer the questions, please, if I forgot to mention about anything special about you, please don't hesitate to mention, and then you can start for my question. Okay? So this question applies to everyone. So the culture of inclusivity, collaboration, and open source ethos is driven by Web3 technologies. So do you agree with this statement, and can you share the hard truths in your real life experience?
Yeah, it's a really loaded question. So, I mean, I can answer it from my angle, right? Being in the venture capital side, like talking to startups, like really early, so we do pre-seed and seed. So we talk to the teams that work on company ideas the first 6 to 12 months. So we basically see everything on the market, including 95% of the stuff that does not make it to the next funding round. So I think we have a really close look on what innovation really looks like versus an investor who comes in after 2 or 3 years because they only see whatever made it basically, and everything that got filtered out they don't even see on the market. I would say that technology. So in general, I would say it's about like lowering entry barriers, because the lower entry barriers become, the more easy it is to compete with anyone on a global level. And I think this is something that we have seen already in the last 2 or 3 decades with the emergence of the internet. That suddenly, like, it was much easier with like way less capital and software to actually develop businesses to compete on a global level. And I think we increasingly see this also with Web3 because it makes it even more technological, and there's also like this element of having token models, which is essentially in a nutshell like everyone can have their own money printing machine. I think there's like always a really simple analogy to explain like what tokenomics are. And sometimes it makes sense, and in many times it does not make so much sense for projects. And what we see, and maybe also fueled by the whole COVID situation the last 2 or 3 years, remote work also accelerated like massively in terms of its acceptance. So what we see is with most companies that we talk to, remote setup is very common. International teams spread out like on several continents, even in early stage teams of 10, 15 people, is also very common. And that's simply for the fact that A, it's possible because we have the technology to enable that today, and second, because it's more efficient. is cheaper, right? If I can hire global talent, like tech talent, for example, and it doesn't matter where it comes from, then it's significantly cheaper than if I'm a company that sits in a like Silicon Valley area or like also here in Germany with like certain price standards. So I think software and Web3 leads to increasing amounts of competition because the world is more connected and it's more globalized. And I think generally speaking that leads to more inclusion because it's about like companies, they care about results, right? At its core, it's about capitalism. It's about like building products, selling them, making money. If you don't survive. Like that's how companies work at its basics. It's pretty simple. So whatever helps them to allocate resources more efficiently is like welcome with open arms. The companies who don't, they will die. So and technology and Web3 makes it easier, and that's why it's more global. And I would say eventually or like ultimately, it also makes the world like more inclusive over time. That's at least my point of view.
Anna, do you have any second thoughts?
Yeah, I was just thinking about community because normally the fashion industry is super competitive, and now doing Web3 and we also founded Universe as a conference, and we're bringing everybody together, and everybody in this industry is understanding that community brings them forward. I mean, the startup scene where everybody is like more closer together, and now we bringing this also into the industry. Plus, they get to know shared revenue models. They didn't know that before because of the competitivity, and also working with other industry like Sony, Volkswagen, or Audi, and I really like that we are now coming more together in our industry.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, by the way. One thing that you missed just a little bit, I mostly identify as an artist. That's my love and passion, and I studied way back when and continued. Not so much in the history, but yeah, I have a PhD in contemporary anthropology and art and stuff like that. So art is really where my passion lies, and that's where I, and to Berlin, we do exhibitions, and I'm also on the team for Crypto Girls Club. So that kind of brings me into some of the answers to the question as well, in terms of art has become so much less of an elitist institution with the advent of blockchain technology, and it has allowed so much more inclusivity thanks to the technology being available, and artists all over the world having the opportunity to do something with their art and actually earn something with it on much more of a global platform. This includes people in underdeveloped countries, women, minorities, anyone all over the world. And since there is such a large population of anonymous people in the Web3 space as well online, it gives anybody the opportunity to start from scratch and not necessarily have to identify with a specific gender or place. And it's shown that there is so much inclusivity, even if you don't necessarily know the person, if you just want to support their art or what they're building. And it shows also, in a sense, this meritocracy where it's what you're producing is what matters. What you're creating, how you're doing it, how innovative you're being, that's really what people are interested in. And that is incredible compared to a lot of other industries, especially in our world.
Absolutely, yeah. So following that phase, I wanted to have one more question for you, Rebecca. So from the anthropology and the cultural development perspective, what's the biggest impact in your view that the Web3 technology had in the art and also the human history?
So this, I think, largely comes down to being able to own digital assets. This has not happened previously, and anyone who is a digital artist didn't have the opportunity to sell their art online as anything comparable to an original art piece. So this is revolutionary to the art world, and you can really see that in some pockets it is exploding and slowly coming into the traditional art world as well. Sotheby's and Christie's, some of the largest auction houses, are already really embracing it, and you can see slowly some of the larger art galleries as well. So I think because digital asset ownership, it has so many implications, but we can see that art is one of the largest places where we've experienced a lot of growth so far. So I think in terms of culture and sort of the history in the previous years of what we've seen in Web3, it's incredibly revolutionary that artists can own their digital assets and sell them, and royalties are also enormous, which is a little bit of a hot topic these days because there's a lot of marketplaces that are removing their royalties, but there's also a lot of marketplaces that are fighting for it. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics and evolution that's even happening now.
The traceability of the royalty effects, that's really helping a lot of artists and also their lives as well, right? Yeah, next question, actually I have some questions for Anna. So like AI, fashion and metaverse, all these hot keywords that you're actually presenting. So year of the 22, this year is all about the mass adoption, right? And so in your view, like how do this Web3 technology shape the fashion industry today? And also, could you also elaborate, because not everyone today is also actually coming from fashion industry, there are people from other industries as well. So how, can you also share some other use cases or some examples that the people not in the fashion industry can also involved in, in the metaverse and stuff?
Let's start with the last question. So I would say in every digital room you go, everywhere where you enter into metaverses, you need digital fashion. In every game you enter, you need to dress. Nobody's working naked. I think and we believe digital fashion is the most important thing for metaverses. And what you about fashion and Web3 and metaverse, I think, in my opinion, this whole metaverse Web3 is the consequent step for digital fashion and the whole digital value chain. I mean, I started being a designer for 15 years, creating AI to cut down product creation value chain, actually to go into production easier, but then we move really fast into Web3 and metaverse, and this is just a consequence of this value chain to go digital in a further way. And just to have a look to the industry, I mean, they could keep producing millions of designs physically, but if they design one digital item, they can sell thousands of this one item digitally. So it's actually also super sustainable, and this is for me the end.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, great. And my next question goes to Ben. So as an investor, your job is to read the future of Web3, right?
Place bets on the future.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Some might go right and many go wrong. That's
Oh, and so then my next question can be a little bit tough to you because that's about that. So especially in the upcoming recessions that we are facing, in your view, how Web3 technology brings value to the German and European economies? In the sense, how do you measure the startup success and predict the future performance especially in times of the economic downturn?
I think that, so first of all, I think Web3 makes the VC world much faster. I think that's an observation we had from the last few years, that this feature of many companies can launch their own protocols or their own tokenomics is a very new thing, that you have this digital ownership of, and you suddenly have this sort of digital securities that many companies just start spitting out. And in some cases makes, if you look at a protocol, the layer ones in Ethereum or Solana, when they launch, then the entire network itself is decentralized, so at least that's the goal. So the token represents basically the economic value of the network itself, right? The more tokens you own, the more you participate in the value that's created through the network being active and being adopted. But that ranges also to normal businesses like marketplaces, for example. I don't know, there's something like Rarible, which is basically OpenSea, but they launch their own token, right? So you could argue it's a traditional company, as we used to from many years ago, with there's a shareholder registry somewhere, and people it could be an open shareholder, a listed company, it could be a private company. But then even they say oh yeah, we want to launch this token, and the idea is that the value of the company over time is supposed to get more decentralized too, and then the token is supposed to capture that value instead of the equity as it was used to before. And I think that technological option had this caused a lot of debates about, do we even need venture capitalists anymore? Because if any company can just launch their own sort of digital securities on chains and protocols, and everyone can just tap into it. And what most people don't know, and I learned this myself when I entered the VC space as well, is if you are a private individual who does not have a certain amount of wealth, it's basically impossible for you to invest in private companies. Not only because you don't have access to them or you don't know them, but also because sometimes it's even legally forbidden by law. So in the US, for example, you need to be something called to be an accredited investor. And the definition for the SEC, I think in this case, is very clear. It's like you have to have, I think, 200K per year annual income, like for several years in a row at least, or $1 million net worth. If you don't have that, guess what? You cannot invest in startups, right? So the discussion started like when this Web3 movement started, like, oh, like this changes everything because it's basically like screw you to the government and the SEC and whatever because we just do it anyways, and I can have a decentralized wallet, I can plug in, I can buy whatever the hell I want. So that's possible from a technological level. But then I would argue, I think now is a good timing to say this. There always comes a time of reality check, right? To be like, there's this initial phase of enthusiasm, of an hype, of something new is possible with all the options that are on the table. Yes, but it doesn't mean that it always leads to great value, and that's usually in the end of the day because it's the wrong people. Like, and I think we see this week itself, right? Like. And what investors, professional investors do, VCs do, I mean the good ones, there's also many that fail, and knock on wood that it doesn't include us in the future, is like we need to then spend much more time than most people to analyze business models, understand what people try to build, and put heavy bets on the founders, like who are the founders for building something? Do they bring integrity? Are they reliable? What's their background? What are their personality traits? So I think that kind of remains the same. I don't think that has changed. But I think the speed and the amount of noise of what's happened in the last years has kind of changed a bit. And I think otherwise, when it comes to Germany, it's I think this is just, as I said before, I mean, this is more global, it's more inclusive. So I think it's innovation that kind of everyone benefits with. But if we tie it down to local ecosystems, then of course it's the countries that have the best regulations, right? So if you look at token projects, then they choose specific places where the regulations are set up in the way that they're the most friendly towards them. And in Europe, for example, this is where Switzerland is really popular, and Germany has done a lot in the last years to bring more clarity into certain business models. So for example, there's something called crypto custody, right? There's a lot of companies in Germany who do this quite successfully. There's a crypto license you can get from the German regulator, but these are all things that take time and are based on government movement. And I think depending on which country you're judging from, this could be a lot faster. But then again, I come from a very biased perspective, so yeah, these are just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, and actually, I just thought about like one extra question related to that. Like some of us here are actually also like some interested in like some privately, engaging with the crypto or the blockchain stuff, right? Especially one of the reasons like the mass adoption has been driven is also because of the boom of the NFT stuff, right? So like any of you wants to talk about from more like, personal investment perspective?
Ask the artist about investments, huh? I know from our community, the NFT Club community, we have a large, broad range of people that includes collectors, investors, artists, businesses, NFTs, collections, startups, everything under the sun. And I have noticed that there have been certain trends, especially in the last year, where a lot of the collectors, especially collectors that are interested in speculative PFP projects, to see which ones are going to go up and which ones are trending. I have noticed that in a broad sense that a lot of them have burnt out as well, because there's been so much inflation of the amount of projects, and there's been so much hype, and it's just been, the bull market at the beginning of this year was really, really intense. And there have been a lot of NFT projects that have, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term rugging. It basically means when an NFT project kind of pulls out and leaves everybody in the dust. And that's also in the sense why NFTs have in the mainstream become associated with certain scams or scandals, because you do have to be very careful in where you put your money. And I have noticed that there are a lot of collectors that have become very, very cautious in terms of what NFT projects they choose to invest in, which ones they choose to support. A lot of it comes back down to communities, what kind of community is backing the project, who are the founders. A lot of the projects are also anonymous, and that's becoming very suspicious for a lot of people that are wanting to invest. And so, yeah, it comes down to who is the project, working with what chain is it on. I know a lot of people are also a lot more interested in Solana and other ecosystems compared to a year ago as well. So I can see the collectors diversifying, but also becoming a lot more cautious and wise. And there are a lot more people turning to one-on-one art as well as an investable strategy, because the art collection as an investment strategy has been done for a very, very long time in the traditional art world. And if you're investing in a particular artist, you can see their track record, you can see that they have been obviously committed for a certain number of years, you can also see that there's other collectors invested in them, and so I can see that some of the NFT collectors, or the degens as they are sometimes called, I can see some of them being more and more interested to the one-on-one art space and seeing artists put their time and energy and become a lot more reliable. And so they're investing in the artists in a very similar way that traditional art investing happens. So some of those trends I've been able to see in our community, for example.
Yeah, great. And Ben, like from investment perspective, that do you have any quick or just a few lines of the criteria that personal private investors might need to look at?
No investment advice. As always, full disclosure. I mean, it really depends on what you invest in, right? I think people need to. I think the majority of the problem, and I mean this also ties into the topic of inclusion, right? Is I think education. So, I mean, I'm from Germany, so I experienced a full German education, and I think the German education system completely fails in providing a financial education. I think finance is actually not that hard as it sounds to most people, and most people have a little fear of touching it with. It's actually really basic if you think about it, like what investment is all about. And I think what people need to be aware of is the risks that they're kind of dealing with, the risk portfolio, the risk appetite that they feel comfortable with, because risk behavior is also something that's very subjective. And that ties into expected returns, right? But people should understand, like a basic rule of finance is the higher the potential returns, the higher the risks, like it correlates. And if there's no education about that, then a lot of people are doing a lot of risks that they might not feel comfortable with. And we are currently in a time when, again, there's a reality check, and people will be made painfully aware of that. Otherwise, it depends on the project. I mean, you can, if you want to play it safe and you want to have exposure to the crypto space, go with the big protocols, the big layers. I can assure you, if they fail, your problems are not going to be the biggest ones. There's a lot of people here who have much more like holding much bigger bags than you, and they'll put their entire careers and their brain juice into this. So if you buy like some Bitcoin or just some Ethereum and just hold it steady for a long time, I think it's a pretty safe bet. Maybe a side mark in Germany, but maybe not everyone knows as well. I think the tax rule here is a bit weird. It's like if you hold crypto assets for more than 1 year and you don't sell it, it's tax-free. If you sell them within, and that also accounts for buying some Bitcoin and then changing it into Ethereum or whatever, they all count as transactions. So if you do that within less than 12 months, it's whatever gains you make is fully taxable based on your personal income tax. Most people don't even know this. Actually, the finance department in most locations in Germany doesn't even know this. But it's your obligation to report this proactively. And if you don't, the finance department has up to 10 years in hindsight to come back to you. And if it's more than 50,000 euro gains, which can happen if you buy a few Bitcoins, it's actually, you can go to jail. So, and why does this rule exist? It's well, because I think it applies to some regulatory framework that was made originally for, I think, old timers and postal stamps. And it's like, when you buy an old timer and you hold it more than a year, then I think it's tax-free. I think this is the law where it's not like, wow, our regulator is like so modern, they came up with it. No, they just put it into this like old framework, and they still have to come up with something in the coming years that kind of makes it like more streamlined. Yeah. So this is just a side note. So if you buy crypto, unless you're a professional trader, I would also advise just hold it for long term, especially if you're a German have a German tax registry. Yeah. Thank
you so much. Yeah. So do the due diligence, and then consider the tax, and then also the hold. It's a long-term game, right? Thank you so much. So I have my last question before we turn the questions to the floor. I'd like to ask all three of you about a little bit on the gender inclusion perspective. So, in your view, what's the most important like a mindset that everyone in our room today should have when it comes to supporting the gender balance movement in Web3? And if we can also inspire us, that would be great.
Again, I come from an investor perspective, right? So our mindset is that, so I believe firmly that in 50 or 100 years in the future, I don't think sexism or racism probably exists anymore. And not because it's not nice, but because I think it's stupid. I think that's the simple explanation. Why? Because, for example, if you're an investor, you look for the best deals, right? You invest in companies with the promise of making good bets in the future that lead into great companies and yield great returns, because that's our job as an investor, right? That's what we are paid for, and that's what our bonuses consist of. It would be stupid for me to discriminate founders based on what sexual orientation, what gender, or what country they come from. All I care about in that sense, in that context, is about, are these the best founders with the best ideas at the right point of time, yes or no? And anything else doesn't matter. And I think you can apply the same logic if you have a company and you want to hire people. It's the same thing. It's about like, are these people that are hired the best people fit for the jobs and the tasks that I want to task them with? Yes or no? And every time I would discriminate based on like, I don't know, I don't like women in my job, then that means that it's gonna cost me, because it means that in the job market, I have less people to choose from, and that will drive up my prices. And that's why I will come to the simple conclusion with, hypothetically, I think it's stupid to make decisions based on that. The problem is though that it's very difficult to make decisions, so most people, I think, racism or sexism, in my point of view, often exists still today because people just don't know how to judge otherwise. It's like, there's no, like, I think discrimination is necessary in the sense that not in a negative sense, but more like I need to make a decision, right? If I hire for one job, I have two people, I have only one job, I need to make a decision. So I will, by any means, whatever standards or algorithm I use to make my decision, I will have to say to one person yes and to one person no. So I need to have data for which I make my decision by. My assumption is that most people who have a sexist behavior or whatever is probably because they don't know better. It's like, oh, I have to make a decision, what do I do to make my decisions? And then people the stereotype because it's kind of like the easy or lazy way to make a decision. I think in the future we'll have a much more data-driven approach, and this is where this psychological component maybe comes a little bit into play. So for example, what I find interesting is something called psychometric models, for example. So it's the idea that if I have an individual, how could I describe them in terms of data that describes them as a personality? Like, what's their IQ, what are their personality traits, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what values do they identify with? And when I talk about personality traits, is how open are they, how creative, how hard do they work, what are leadership skills? These are the data points that matter. And I think we're just in really early stages. Most people don't understand how to evaluate the data, and I think in a 50 or 100 years time, will become significantly more data-driven, and then at some point, I think this will be out there. These are my 2 cents on it.
Perfect. Anna?
This is cool, then an AI could decide in who you will invest in. I like that.
Which makes me unemployed.
No, that's the problem.
Already.
Yeah, that's true also, yeah. Okay, yeah, well, if we talk about Web3, that means technology, and I mean, I found that we see a tech company, a software company, and I'm working in a really male environment. And actually, I have to say, it's not only motivating me every day to change the fashion industry, also to be a role model, because I see few founders or female founders even coming more and more. But I want to inspire you to found a company and founder. We are a lot of women here, and I'm working also for that, and that's why I'm doing all the competition and talking a lot, and also working as a mentor on everything to help women to found companies. And with kids also. I have also kids. I can really inspire, found a company with kids.
Yeah, the personal view is a really great role model for a lot of people. Thank you for that. Rebecca?
So I think, traditionally, Web3 is sort of often at this crossroads of finance and tech, right? Which are traditionally male-dominant fields for a variety of reasons, which also includes personal choice and preferences depending on what country you're from, what your personality types are. and that also skews with gender as well. Some of these preferences, you can see that women are really, really excelling in university. They're getting more degrees in bachelor, masters, and PhDs in a lot of the social sciences. Almost all of those areas are completely female dominated. And we can see that in tech and finance, that's not often the case, that it's a much lower percentage of women. But what's really interesting, once tech and finance kind of come together in Web3, there's this huge community component, right? So there's the communication aspect, there's the networking aspect, there's the media, social media, marketing, there's all of these other fields that are leaning a little bit more towards the social sciences and the communication skills and the people skills, where a lot of women really love to work in those areas, broadly on a population level speaking. So we can see a lot of women getting really interested and involved in Web3 companies in a lot of these different roles, which also exposes them to finance and tech and all these other fields that maybe they weren't necessarily so interested in or had so much contact with. And you can see that, part of the reason why I help run the Crypto Girls Club is because there are a lot of women that are very curious, but they don't necessarily feel so comfortable because they have this idea that it is a very man-heavy bro culture kind of space. And so I think it is really valuable for women to have a place where they can be onboarded and feel supported to ask whatever questions they want and to be complete new beginners. So I think a combination of, organizations like that, doing things like this, kind of showing a little bit more support for women that, it's not as scary as you think, but also seeing the women that are really excelling as founders and also within Web3 companies, whether they're building their own thing, whether they're developing the communities, whether they're teaching the tech and finance dudes how to communicate better. There's a huge opportunity and so many more jobs and roles available for a broad spectrum of people with many different interests. So I think that is a really motivating and inspiring factor and a reason why a lot of women are also coming to the Web3 space as well, and will make it more inclusive and uplift everybody involved.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, and also to summarize, the point is what we are doing, when we talk about the gender balance, the focus should be, I believe, eventually we want to see the world that, everyone sees everyone as a human being, because gender is just very tiny bit of the inclusion and diversity stuff, and everyone, if you look around, everyone looks very different, right? So how do we work towards making the world, more inclusive and also more efficient in regards to applying, all this technology, adoption and so on in the different kind of industries like the art and then design. Traditionally, a lot of people thought, art and technology sounded a little bit, quite far away. But nowadays, with the convergence of the NFT and all these technologies, we are seeing that it's actually merging together and coming all together. So I think that's the power of Web3 technology that's actually, helping to evolve our society, in my opinion. So I will wrap it up from here, and I'd like to have one or two questions from the guests. Anyone wants to ask a question? Yes, please.
Without the mic?
Yeah.
All right. So not necessarily a question, but just some brain nugget. Especially you were mentioning that diversity is so much more than just gender. And considering that identity in Web3 is, or in internet in general, is an unsolved problem yet, I think the solution for identity inherently solves inequality and these imbalances of diversity. Pretty sure. Just want to say that.
Thank you so much for adding the thoughts. Yeah. And if anyone wants to, yeah.
I have a question mainly for the NFT space, so mainly for the NFT person. So in the current events, so everybody's surely aware, the current crypto events, etc. Do you think it's going to drive the NFT space towards a better place? So a more sustainable place where actually good projects are making it, etc. Or it's going to turn all the buyers and people with free money who are ready to invest into art, would that maybe put it off from the space for a while? What are your thoughts on that?
It's really hard to predict how things will move forward, but you can really see. So when the bear market hits, you can really notice that there were a lot of people that were like, no, this is not really for me. Especially a lot of artists that had heard about the hype and were really kind of curious, have quieted down a little bit, and we can see that it's a normal progression of ups and downs. And a lot of people though that are fully embedded in the space, they're sort of taking this time to build, right? And they're taking this time to develop as their artists or developers or whatever, or NFT projects. And you can see that the people that are staying through the harder times are a lot more interested in quality over quantity. And it gives a nice opportunity as well. Like regardless of ups or downs, there's always an opportunity you can squeeze out of it, right? So I've noticed that people are using the opportunity to really work on their projects and develop higher quality projects as well, because the space is completely flooded and you really need to prove that you are worth investing in. So the standard has really gone up, and the collectors have also become a lot more scrupulous. They've become a lot more picky about what they're choosing to invest in. So that's also, in senses, elevating the quality of what people are investing in and elevating the quality of what sticks around, right? Because if people notice that it's a project that's not really cutting it, then they're not as likely to invest and it's not going to get off the ground, right? So in some ways, it has been beneficial that people have been a little bit more mindful or a little bit more cautious in what they're choosing to invest in. And at the same time, you can see that a lot of the one-on-one artists, the traditional artists, because what we do is make art, and it doesn't matter what market we're in, artists are always poor anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We're always going to continue to do our craft and build those networks and continue creating. And you can see that even in the last year, there's been a huge explosion within the one-on-one art communities in different bubbles. So I think it's only a matter of time before that leaks over more and more into traditional art spaces. Even just last week, we had a really lovely gallery exhibition, NFT meets traditional art, at a large contemporary gallery in Charlottenburg. Königsgalerie is huge, and they're also getting more and more into NFTs. So you can see that is the trajectory, and that is the trend. And like anything, it's slow going, especially in the traditional art world, which takes a long time for any kind of adoption. But yeah, slowly but surely.
We have one last question here. Then.
Thank you. So I have a startup, 2 female co-founders. Can we knock on your door?
Of course.
Okay.
Is it Web3 related?
It's I can show you very quickly after
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
I think it will be very.
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a quick one, so we can have one last question here, and then we can wrap it up. Going 1, going 2. Oh, okay, great. I wanted to just let you know, in the middle, like in these tables and also at the bar, there's a QR code. If you I wanted to prepare like small gifts that I wanted to send to your. You can also write your company address so that I can send some small gift for like around an year-end thing. So if you want to receive that, you can scan it and then you can submit the form. Then I will know that, and then I can include you to send when I send the gift to your hands. Yeah, thank you so much for today, and then let's have some networking session from now. Thanks.